grandparents gifted me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to give it to my golden child sister. I should speak up about this and let somebody know, so I decided to tell my grandparents, and they were both shocked that this was going on for so long, and I had never had a word about it. I explained to them, I always thought that I kept my mouth shut and kept trying to be a good daughter to my parents. They would eventually be grateful for me and appreciate me, but it was more than clear to me now that this would never happen. They told me that I had done the right thing and said that after I came back from my trip to Rome, I was supposed to go straight to them and nowhere else. They said that they were going to arrange for me to move out of my parents' house and start living with them instead, and when I told them that I would have to move out for college in the fall, they told me that I wouldn't have to worry about it because the college that I had picked was out of state, and they said that they were going to bear all the expenses for that. So I guess just one conversation with my grandparents was all that I needed to absolutely fix my life, because now I don't even have to worry about where I'm going to live once I finally get back, since I've pissed my parents off real bad, and I think it's unlikely that they will be welcoming me back with open arms. My parents had already made it clear to me in the beginning when I had started applying to colleges that they would not be able to pay for my tuition, even though they had done it for June. They actually used it as an excuse, saying that they had already covered the expenses for one daughter to go to college, but I would have to take care of myself on my own, and now I don't even have to worry about that. So I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out, and within a week, I'll be back home, but now I will definitely be living a better life as compared to earlier. Update to hi. So my trip came to an end a couple of days ago, and now I'm living with my grandparents, just as they had instructed me to. I went over to their place as soon as I had landed here, and I was pretty surprised to see that they already had the guest room set up for me to stay, and all the things from my parents' house had been moved here once I came back, and they welcomed me warmly. My grandparents told me that after my conversation with them, where I had told them everything, they had gone to confront my parents. They were supposed to meet anyway, because my parents had called them up on the evening that the accident with June had taken place, and they had called them over so they could discuss what to do and how to go ahead, because my parents really did not want to dip into their savings for the money for the settlement, and they definitely did not want this to go to trial, because then June would be in real trouble, because there was dash cam footage to prove that she had caused the accident, and an out-of-court settlement is the only way to go for them. But the cab driver was apparently demanding an incredibly high amount, and they needed my grandparents to help them out here. But when they met, my grandparents brought up the situation with me first and asked my parents if it was true that they had been treating me badly all my life, and had even asked me to give up my trip so June could go in my place. At first, they apparently tried to skirt around the question by saying that they were here to discuss the situation with June and how to get her out of trouble, and I was in Rome having the time of my life, so it seemed unnecessary to talk about these things. But my grandparents insisted on talking about me because they wanted to get to the bottom of this, and eventually my parents just snapped and said that it was true, but I had proved that this was exactly the kind of treatment that I deserved by abandoning my family in their time of trouble. Apparently my parents had said that I had only shown up at the hospital to grab my flight ticket, so I would be able to make it in time for my trip without caring about what June or even what they were going through. They said that I had always been jealous of June because she had been better than me at every single thing, and I couldn't stand it, so that was really not their fault. They claimed that they had never treated me unfairly, which was a huge lie. My parents said that I was just being entitled and spoiled, and they were no longer going to entertain it when I came back. That was all that my grandparents needed to hear to make up their minds about cutting off their only son. My grandparents and parents got into an argument over this, and my parents ended up telling them that they were free to leave and said that they didn't need their help anymore since they were actually supporting my selfish behavior. They also said that they didn't want me back, so if my grandparents wanted to take me with them, they were more than welcome to do that as well. So my grandparents eventually got people to pack all the things in my room and moved my stuff to their house so I could make myself comfortable. After my grandparents told me about whatever had happened with my parents, I ended up crying because it just hurt. I had always known that my parents couldn't care less about me, but they were all that I had known for the past 18 years, and my heart was broken. I literally pray that nobody else has to go through crap like this. But anyway, my grandparents were there for me all along, and I'm really very grateful for that anyway. Now I'm not confused. I'm going to be living with them, and this is my home now. I'll definitely be going to college in a couple of months, but until then, my grandparents have promised to be there with me, and even when I'm off to college, they have said that I have nothing to worry about since they're going to cover all my expenses. I have had no contact with my parents or June after I came back, and I hadn't even checked the last couple of messages that they had sent me because I was trying to make the best of my trip. So I finally checked them today since I thought I was in a better place mentally, and I'm so glad that I did not check these messages earlier, because then I definitely would have had another mental breakdown. Jen's messages were all along the same lines: I'm selfish and entitled, and I'm spoiled, and she's glad that she won't have anything to do with me at this point on earth, because I don't deserve her company anyway. I think she got that a little bit twisted. I think she's the one who doesn't deserve my company, but whatever, it doesn't even matter to me. It's really my parents that hurt me more than anything else, but at this point, I don't even feel surprised at the things they say to me. My parents sent me a couple of messages saying that what I had done was incredibly heartless, and they should have stopped me the second that I showed up at the hospital, but it was their failure that they had not managed to raise me right, and then I slipped through their hands. Even at the hospital, when I made a run for it so I could go on the trip, my family was such a difficult situation. I did not respond to that message they sent. Been treated, even though my parents had always done everything in their power to make sure that I had a comfortable life. I guess my parents don't understand that having a comfortable life is very different from having a good childhood. They said that they sent me to school, fed me, clothed me, and I had a roof over my head at all times. There was really nothing more that I could have asked for, but in spite of all of that, I was still cribbing about how I was treated by my parents. They said that just because I was jealous of June, I couldn't make them out to be the villains, because that was simply unfair. And then they said that they were right about calling me a waste, because that's all I really was. I had wasted their time and energy for so many years, and now they were finally glad to be rid of me. That really got to me, and I almost cried about it, but I had promised myself after speaking to my grandparents that I was not going to let their harsh words get to me anymore, because it's just not worth it. So I didn't cry, but I did block my parents so that they wouldn't be able to have any access to me anymore. Hopefully, I'm going to start my healing journey and get over this eventually, because I really think that after all the trauma that they have caused me, I seriously need to move on and erase every trace of them from my brain completely if I want to live my best life. I don't know if that's actually possible, but it's worth a try. Update 3. So the funniest and craziest thing happened today. It's been close to 2 weeks since I returned from my trip, and so far, I have had absolutely no idea what's been going on with my parents in June, but I'm assuming that they are still struggling to come up with the money so they can have an out-of-court settlement with the cab driver, because this afternoon my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, and they were in a vengeful mood. Thankfully, they did not even acknowledge my existence when I opened the door and walked right past me to go to the living room and sit down with my grandparents. I had no idea what to do when I was lurking around the living room, but my grandparents told me to sit down with them. They knew that my parents would not be too happy about this decision of including me in the conversation, and I could see it on their faces, but if they were pissed about it, they did not say anything anyway. As soon as we were all seated, my grandparents asked them what they were there for. Since the last time that they had spoken to each other, my parents had made it very clear that they wanted nothing to do with them, because they had been supporting my decisions. My parents said that they were still going to stick to that, but before they cut each other off entirely, they had some scores to settle, and then they brought out a document with a bunch of calculations on it, and said that there was a huge amount of money that they had spent on raising me, and since my grandparents had so graciously taken over the duties of parents, they expected themselves to be absolved, and said that they wanted all the money that they had spent on me so far to be paid to them by my grandparents. Now, they were the ones who were responsible for me. I was shocked that they were here to make such a ridiculous demand, and all I could do was just look at them, because I had no words for how low this was. I could tell that this was just a way to make us all feel small, because they were demanding almost $120,000. It was just crazy. But then my grandparents said that they just needed a moment to themselves in private, and left the room to discuss this between themselves. There was a very awkward silence, because it was just me and my parents in the living room, and they refused to acknowledge me in any way whatsoever. They didn't even look at me, and I found it very awkward, but thankfully after a couple of minutes my grandparents were back. They took their seats. My grandpa tried to be as calm and polite as possible, and said that it was true that they were claiming responsibility, and they would gladly repay the amount that my parents had spent on me so far. I was about to interrupt, because I thought it was very unfair that they were even asking for this kind of money, since it was not something that they had done as a favor to me. They were my parents, and they were supposed to raise me. They had only done their duty, and even then they had done the bare minimum, so they did not deserve even $1 out of my grandparents. But my grandparents told me not to interrupt, and then they went on to say that they would repay this amount, but only on one condition: that my parents repay all the money that they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years, and that had my parents absolutely stumped. I could see on their faces that they had been owned, and I thought it was very funny, because they looked like deer caught in headlights, so I had to leave the room, because I wanted to laugh so bad at them. After that I didn't come back down from my room until my parents had already left, and when I asked my grandparents what had happened after they left the room, they told me that my parents had tried to argue their way out of this, but there was no way that they could do anything, so eventually they just ended up cursing out all of us and left in a huff, which is just so typical of them. But anyway, I don't think they will be back anytime soon after this stunning humiliation, and even if they come back, I don't think it'll be a problem for anyone, since my grandparents have proven that they are more than capable of handling them on their own. The fact that my father is their only son is not going to make them go soft on them, and I'm going to be off to college in a couple of months anyway, so I'm honestly just looking forward to that. And yeah, going on the trip to Rome was probably the best decision that I could have made.